Good morning, everyone. It is really nice to see so many of you that have gathered here this morning. That's great. What I would appreciate is, if possible, I really would appreciate if everybody would turn on their video so that we can have a more one-to-one discussion. Okay. We're ready to begin. I've already said good morning, so I'll say Boker Tov. Good morning again. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for our ongoing candidate series. I'm Ron Halber, the Executive Director of the JCRC of Greater Washington, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to County Executive Marc Elrich, who is running for re-election. Before we begin, you should know that this program is being recorded. Also, if you want to access closed captioning, please click on the live transcript button on your screen. And finally, after we have heard from Marc, I will moderate a Q&A session. Please do not unmute yourselves until I ask you to do so, and then make sure that your question is succinct so we can get as many as possible. You'll notice during these gatherings, I refer to the county executive as Marc. I refer to a lot of the candidates by their first name. Every candidate is asked in advance if they mind that formal or more formal presentation. So before we do so, out of respect to the office, we always ask ahead of time. As a 501c3, as you know, the JCRC does not support or oppose any candidate for public office. I want to say hi, Sam Kaplan. I see the president of our federation, our past president of our JCRC there. I see a few other of our board members. Hi, Asia. As the 501c3, the JCRC does not support or oppose candidates for public office, but we know that these meetings are critical to fulfilling our mission to educate the Jewish community and to promote civic participation. As the JCRC's chief community and government relations arm, the JCRC understands the importance of advocating for issues that address the funding and critical social welfare needs and the critical general welfare needs of our community. We represent over 100 synagogues, day schools, and social service agencies, including the Federation of Greater Washington. In addition to government relations, the JCRC is committed on promoting social justice and intergroup relations, combating anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred, and of course, supporting the state of Israel. Now let me introduce our guest, County Executive Marc Elrich, whose political career spans 35 years. Before becoming county executive in 2018, Marc served 12 years as an at-large member of the county council. And I think if anybody questions this man's resilience, I think, Marc, didn't you run 4 times for county council before you got on? Or 3 times?
Yeah, I got on the 5th time.
5th time. So resilience, huh? That says it right there. Who's willing to torture themselves 4 times? But prior to that stint, he was a council member on the Tacoma Park City Council from 1987 to 2006. And what a lot of people don't know is that Marc also taught at Rawlings Terrace Elementary School for 17 years as a teacher, one of the highest poverty schools in the county. The county executive was born in DC and moved to Montgomery County at a young age. After graduating from Einstein High School, he attended the University of Maryland and then received a master's in teaching from Johns Hopkins. So we want to make this phone call as interactive as possible. So I'm going to start off. Marc's going to speak for about 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions and have a chance to speak and decide what, so for the county executive to convince you why to speak. The county executive will speak why he's running for re-election, and feel free to ask him any questions. Marc, we'll start with the very basic question. Why are you running for re-election? Take it from there.
Thank you. And thank everybody for tuning in this morning. I guess I'll work my way to answering that question. Just a quick introduction. I think you've kind of told a little bit about me. I've been an activist for a very long time. So, when I was a kid, as a 12-year-old, I went to my first anti-war demonstration in DC. I was down in Washington for Dr. King's March on Washington. I was active in civil rights and anti-war activities at the University of Maryland in the 60s. When I moved to Tacoma Park, I started doing tenant organizing and community organizing. And I've always been, deeply rooted in the community. I believe that you can change things, but you've got to engage the people who you live with in the process of change. And I know that there's a lot of times people have trepidation about new ideas and new ways of doing things. But to me, the most effective way of engaging people is to make sure they feel they've got a part in the decisions that are going to shape their community going forward. And sometimes that requires patience. But one thing you learn if you're somebody who wants to change things is you better be patient, because if you're not patient, you're going to be severely disappointed. Things don't change. on a dime. And just because you want to see things different doesn't mean they're going to become different instantly. So I've learned patience over time, and I've tried to bring that to the work I do. I've been in county executive now 3.5 years, and I think my campaign theme, not formally, is 4 normal years. I would like to have 4 normal years to work on things in the county. I walked in, well, I'll go back. When I was campaigning last time, I would tell people that the county's going to run out of money. And I did not have a Christmas tree as promises. I told people I was going to do 2 things. I was going to continue to invest in early childhood education, and that I was going to focus on trying to get transit built in this county, because one of the biggest impediments to economic development is the county's lack of transit. And Metro is great, but Metro is really limited in where it goes and who it serves. And we needed something much more robust. And knowing that we were going to run out of money, I thought that rather than coming up with the traditional candidate's Christmas tree of, I'm going to change everything in the universe, fix everything. I won't talk to you about how much it's going to cost and that we don't have the money to do it. I'm just going to tell you I'm going to do a million things and then sprinkle as much candy around as you can. And I thought I didn't want to do that. If I was going to have limited dollars, I wanted to focus on things I thought would actually make a difference. And those are the 2 things I thought were probably 2 of the biggest things that the county had to tackle. And so we focused on that. Every year, we've increased the money funding for early childhood. And every year we've moved forward on getting ourselves in a position to build bus rapid transit at scale in this county. And we're now at the point when we're beginning to be able to submit for federal funds. So we've gotten where we want to go, at least in those 2 things. At least we're making progress in those 2 things. But on my second day in office, the finance people came down and said, Mark, we need to talk to you. And it was like this conversation I was dreading because it wasn't on my schedule. And I was told then that we had a $45 million shortfall in revenues. And I was going to have to make $45 million in cuts in the then current budget. In other words, I had to take $45 million out of the budget I was going to be operating on that ended in June of 2019. And that was a hard thing to do. It's one of the hardest things I had to do in my life, because I'm sitting there with all of these programs in Montgomery County and figuring out which ones do I cut to get this $45 million in savings. And it was a painful, hard thing to do, but it was something I had no choice but to do. And right before we submitted our budget, after we thought we had gotten everything straight, the state comes in and says, you're not going to get $50 million in revenue expected from income taxes. And so we had to scramble and write down another $50 million in costs for that year, another $50 million in cuts. That's a hard way to start, is making decisions on what to cut. And it affected the budget that we put together going forward because of the crazy tax system we had that we inherited that thankfully the voters changed 2 years ago. Any reduction in property taxes became the base for next year's property taxes. And so we actually had less money to work with than we thought going into the year where I would actually be producing my own budget. So that first year was really hard. In my second year, we're going along. China's bubbling with COVID. I bring my budget over to the council the same day the state shuts down. We had had our first 3 cases of COVID that was beginning to rip through the state. And the council said, we're only doing the same services budget. We're not going to consider anything in your budget. And you're just going to do the same services you did the year before, which is kind of what we did. And at that point, we had resources to do it. My third year kind of began the same way. Now we were living on federal money, so we knew we could balance the budget, but like everybody else in the country, those 2 amazing seats that flipped in the South that gave the Senate the votes to have a president be able to send out large packages of money to local jurisdictions. That is how we balanced our budget. And of course, when you're balancing a budget with somebody else's money that you don't know is going to be there the next year, you can't expand your budget because you don't know if you're going to be able to fund it in the following year. And the council gave me another limitation of They didn't want to see new programs. They wanted programs limited. We didn't expand, any of our programs for support for nonprofits because that would have been new programs. So, for 2 years, we haven't added new programs really, even in the nonprofit space, in order to stay within the limits. So that's, it's kind of disappointing because there are a lot of things I wanted to do, but everything was predicated on having tax revenues to be able to do it. I would like to have gone farther with childcare. We wanted to put more resources into schools involving mental health, and all those things were precluded by the limitations. And just so you understand the county process, the county council sets spending affordability guidelines, how much you can bond for, which affects how much schools you build, and then what your operating limits are. And those two things are real constraints. And I've, stayed as close to those as I possibly can. This year is the first year I've had to deal with normal budget. Our county recovered, and I don't think people realize how much we recovered, but I was able to boost school funding by $147 million. And I was able to put a record amount of funding in housing, $140 million, and do a $40 million fund that we had never had before. And that's because our revenues came back. They came back without a tax increase. We're seeing increases in income taxes, increase in property taxes, a healthier economy than the county's had in a while. You'll see cranes going up now, an explosion in the life sciences sector. And the best news was the state told us that we should consider this our new baseline rather than a blip. This wasn't one-time money. This was a new baseline that we could count on going forward. And that was important because it means that this is lasting stuff. I could put things in the budget that would require year-over-year funding, because at least as a baseline, we were going to be able to continue this level of funding. No one told us that we would get the same level of increase every year, but as a base budget to operate on, it gave us a much stronger position. So this is the first time I've been able to create a budget that really reflects the values and the objectives that we've had. And so being able to put money into affordable housing in a big way was important. Being able to help the schools meet their needs, which are really growing and have been amplified by the effects of COVID.
Marc, can I stop and ask you a question there? One of your, obviously this is a race between you and David Blair and Hans Riemer, and by just about by everybody's reasonable standards, David Blair, considering you beat him by less than 100 votes, as your chief opponent, he's been really targeting you on the issue of affordable housing, which you just mentioned. So I think maybe you want to take a sentence or two to address that, because that and economic development have been the two things he's been hammering at you, and I'm interested in how you respond to that.
So, it's interesting. I'd say, Hans is doing the same thing. And, my perspective on this, I spent 12 years on the council, and the council and the planning board's economic development strategy was nothing more than just rezoning everything for higher density and thinking that businesses and housing would get built. And I voted against a lot of this stuff because the county was sitting on 10 million square feet of vacant Class A and Class B space when I came here, and it wasn't being occupied. And we weren't getting new building permits on top of that. And in the housing front, the county had a pipeline of 35,000 approved housing units, and developers weren't building the approved housing units. These are units that a developer could build with no further fuss. All they needed to do is go in and pull a building permit. So when David or Hans criticize me, it's like, you're running against the policies that Hans and Nancy and George put in place before, that David supported. And I kept trying to remind people that you don't, it's not a matter of zoning determines whether or not people come here. You have to have reasons to come here. And you have to understand why people aren't coming here. So, on the housing front, this county's lost 19,000 affordable housing units since the year 2000. It's projected to lose another 11,000 housing units by 2030. That's 30,000 lost housing units. I've got, in the category of people earning $30,000 a year, 24,000 people who can't find affordable housing, spending 50 to 60% of their incomes on housing. There's another 20,000 who are under $50,000 in income, who are in the same boat, spending 50% of their incomes on housing. These people are not affected by any county policies. Our policies did not preserve affordable housing, which led to this massive increase in people who don't have it. And our policies don't create affordable housing because MPDUs are only created for people. We used to say when their program was created for teachers and policemen and firemen. It wasn't created for retail workers and other low-income workers. So we haven't built any housing for people who really struggle. And those are policies that I objected to when I sat on the council. And to be criticized for things that are the results of other people's policies is a bit frustrating. Our decline in housing production goes back over a decade, and our decline in jobs and the job loss in this county goes back over a decade. And one of the things, I did, and I blend these two together because I think it's important. For all the talk about, Montgomery County's bad reputation, no one had ever taken the time to say, okay, why does Montgomery County have a bad reputation? We know that people say this isn't a good place, to build in. Why? And, this is not a good place to operate your business in. So the first thing I did was keep a promise to Sidney Katz. When he voted for the minimum wage, I made a promise that if I got elected executive, we would examine what goes on and how is business affected by county policies. And so with Sidney, we did a listening tour. I think we had 6 meetings in the business community. Basically asked them, why do you tell your friends not to come here? And why do you tell us we're terrible? And we took the results of that and began implementing changes in permitting and began implementing changes in procurement so we could address some of the reasons that people don't come to Montgomery County. And we've been able to make changes in permitting. We're able to get projects approved more quickly. We got complimented by Marriott for not only the speed, but the way we worked with them. The fact they said that we can call you now and people pick up a phone. And we've understood that we needed to give Montgomery County a different reputation. And I would tell the people we were meeting with, I said, you're our ambassadors. If you're out in the community telling people not to come here, then people aren't going to come here. If you're in the community telling people Montgomery County's a good place to do business, then people will come here. And so we focused on dealing with some of those reputational challenges, which were effectively operating challenges on the county's part, because we wanted to change the climate so we could bring people back into the county and give them a greater level of confidence that if they want to invest here, we'll be able to get their projects done. On the housing front, absent policies that are radically different than what the council does now, we're in deep, deep trouble. And it's not going to get better very quickly. We're talking about a housing need. If you take the almost 50,000 people under $50,000 in income who need affordable housing, you add the people who got displaced and the people who are about to get displaced over the next eight years, you're looking at needs that exceed 50,000 affordable units. And this is Montgomery County's policy, just so you can put it in perspective. There's a projection, 2030, 40,000 households come here. Of those households, 10,000 can afford market housing, 30,000 need subsidized housing. Of the subsidized,
What do you want me to do? Break the glass so it fits?
No, I don't want you to break the glass.
of the subsidized housing, a third of it is what we call MPDU housing. So it's the kind of stuff we build. It's 10,000 units that are the kind of housing that Montgomery County builds under affordable housing. It will serve people between 60 and 75% of area median income. The other 50% of people, we don't build any housing at all, people under 50,000 in income. Those are people who we don't build for, that's who's coming here. And without a plan to deal with that, you're not going to build the 40,000 households that you need to build. And the number of affordable units we get 15% of a development. So if 10,000 market units are built over the next 8 years, I'm only getting 1,500 moderately priced dwelling units. I'm getting nothing for people below that. I'm not getting enough for the people in that category. And this is the policies we have. And so if you don't change the percentage of affordable housing that you yield from development, if you're not willing to do what we're proposing, which is putting a lot of money in the acquisition, toward the acquisition of buildings when they come on the market, you're not going to meet your housing goals. And David says simple things like, well, you know, you can build mixed use housing at the Metro. He's right. You can build mixed use housing at the Metro, and you will get 15% of those units affordable, and the other 85% are not going to be affordable to people. And I think I've listened to him enough in the debates. It's a very shallow response. It's true you can build there, but what you get there is not what you need. And it's what leaves Montgomery County in this mess we're in today. And you know, we should have had long ago had preservation policies for existing affordable housing. The county should have been more aggressive. I mean, Ike did a lot of stuff, but one of the problems was he didn't exercise the full right of refusal. So we would get deals where a developer would extend current rents for 5 years or 10 years. But at the end of 5 years and 10 years, the limits on rents come off and they go back to being, you know, market rate housing, and the landlords can do what they want to do with them. So I'm looking at this holistically and trying to figure out what we do. And regionally, you know, there was just a report from the regional housing group that issued some of the earlier studies that were done. And they said nobody in this region is able to build the affordable housing, that people are building housing units, but they're not building the affordable housing units that are in the plan. So just announcing that you're going to go to metro stations and build more affordable housing, that's not the way it happens. You know, I live in the real world. I know that government's going to have to do more. And so this is another place. You know, David simultaneously has a list of 1 million things he's going to do, and then tells you the taxes are too high and you have to lower taxes. I can tell you those two things don't go together. You don't fit in that picture. You know, you'll be one of the things on the block where I decide, is it, you know, is it your stuff that gets done and the support we give the community? How do you operate this county and try to address greater needs when you're going to
Marc,
simultaneously try to reduce income?
I was muted and I unmuted myself. I just wanted to ask you, because we're getting to about the half-hour point, and I want to leave about a half hour for people to ask questions. And you know, we can keep going if as long as if Marc has a few minutes, or if we need a few minutes. I have one quick question. I want everybody to start thinking about your questions, and just either put your name in the chat box, and either I'll ask your question, or if you want to ask it yourself, I'll be happy to unmute you, however you wish. I can fly back and forth between the screens and do that. Marc, if you are to win another term as county executive, what are the 3 things that you want to accomplish in your next term? Like, if you look back, you're 4 years from now and you're deciding whether you want to run for a 3rd term, whether you're going to do it or not. I don't know. I know how old you are. I don't know if you want to run. I don't know if you're going to run for a 3rd term.
I'm 72.
I know. I don't know if
I own it.
You're going to retire at 80 from the county executive? That's when I'm retiring from JCRC, I decided. So
At 80.
At 80. So, so my question to you is, you're looking back, you're sitting out, after your next 4 years in office, you and Debbie are reflecting over a cup of coffee at the Silver Diner. And you're thinking to yourself, I'm so glad we got these 3 things done. What are the 3 things you want? I'm not saying that, you know, in a perfect world, look, we had COVID, plans get derailed. But if there's 3 things you could look back at the end of your next term and say, wow, during the last 4 years, we've got 3 things done for our community, what do you want them to be?
I'm going to need to do more than 3, but I'll tell you what I think are priorities. One is dealing with the affordable housing issue. And I think, you know, engaging the business community to get them to realize you're not going to have a workforce in this county if we go in the direction we're going right now. People simply will not be able to afford to live here. It's going to add enormously to the cost of bringing labor into this county. And we've got to figure out how we actually deal with that. And I'd ask you to think about that issue also from a social justice perspective. And I'm a former teacher, I mentioned that. If families are economically unstable, if the struggle to pay rent competes with the struggle to feed the kids or take care of the kids, clothe the kids, and we all know, even at a middle class level, money can be one of the most contentious things in a relationship. Now put that in a relationship where everybody's struggling to maintain their houses and, where they live. And it creates a lot of tension and kids see it all. And so it's really destructive. The instability, economic instability in families is really destructive of children. And so this is why I think affordable housing is so critically important, why you've got to focus on plans that actually deal with the need. The MPDU program, which everybody points to, I bet nobody in this room knows that the county only has 6,000 MPD units. We started this program in 1975. We've got 6,000 MPDUs. It's a joke. And that's our signature program. That's the one we say we're the leader in the nation. So we need to actually be the leader in the nation instead of pretend we're the leader in nations. That's one thing that I want to deal with. I want to make sure we build the transit system. And we're close to being able to do this. We have mapped out the routes. The proposal, I made this proposal 12 years ago. I literally, with my aide Dale Tibbetts, mapped out 110 miles of bus rapid transit lines that we could build in the county that would connect people from where they lived to where they worked. Because we understood from the business community that transportation in this county was the #1 impediment to being able to do development here. And while we were fiddling around, Tyson's Corner was building the Silver Line and going all the way out to Reston. So, and beyond now. So we don't compete on transportation. And if we cannot provide transportation in this county, we're not ever going to be able to match the economic development they've been able to do in Virginia. So this is a big thing for me, is to deal with the transportation piece. As part of a broader economic development scheme, this is the big project we're working on right now, and I think it's going to be game changing for Montgomery County. I spent 2 years working with WMATA, and we finally got WMATA to agree that at the White Flint Metro Station, they're going to issue a solicitation for a master developer to develop the metro station as a life sciences center, to build another life sciences center in the county on a metro. Because we know from our competition in Boston that there's an enormous thirst for not just life sciences, but to do it in an environment that's more urban and has more amenities. And so if you know where our life science is mostly parked right now in Shady Grove, you get 2 big buildings on a block sometimes, no place to go to lunch, no place to walk to for coffee, no social amenities. And in White Flint, we can create all that. I had the audacity actually to bring down Marc Weller, who's doing the Port Covington project, and have him meet with Alan Gottlieb from Lerner, because I asked Lerner, would they entertain an offer to be bought out or partnered with? And he said, bring it to me. So Weller actually came down and made the family a proposal to redevelop the White Flint station and the Lerner property at White Flint. Lerner's ultimately said no, but what it told me was there's a lot of interest in doing something here if we do the right thing. So we want to turn White Flint into a center of activity that has both amenities and restaurants and all the things people want, but also focuses on life sciences. WMATA, justifiably not just trusting me that this was a good idea, brought in JLL as a consultant, and JLL did an examination in Montgomery County and came back and told WMATA that the highest and best use of the WMATA property in White Flint is life sciences. And that has given WMATA the level of confidence that we're going to turn White Flint into something you've never seen in Montgomery County before. And I'm talking about development on the scale, same scale as Amazon, frankly, 11 or more million square feet over the next 10 years, which is the framework that Amazon was going to promise to bring to Montgomery County. Only life science is worth a hell of a lot more than Amazon is in terms of jobs, in terms of reputational things that benefit the county. The other thing is that I spent 2 years working with the University of Maryland, because we're the only life sciences center in the country, major one, that's lacking graduate education in support of life sciences. All the others are built around grad programs that amplify life sciences. Montgomery County doesn't have that. We've got universities at Shady Grove, we've got Montgomery College, but nothing at the graduate level. And I had long conversations with the university system about no investments in Montgomery County. We are the economic engine of the state. We need to support life sciences, and you guys aren't here. and we need you to do that. So about a year ago, I got this unprecedented agreement, something we've never got in the county, where the University of Maryland came down to USG, and Dr. Perman and Daryl Pines from College Park, and Dr. Perman, is the chancellor of the system. We signed the joint agreement that the university is going to support graduate level research in the county, and that they're going to help with programs to train the workforce to work in life sciences, because they're lacking in the ability to recruit a workforce in Montgomery County. And then the big thing is, in the last few months, and this happened right before as the assembly was coming to a close, University of Maryland proposed to build an AI, artificial intelligence center, big data computational center in White Flint, with dedicated faculty that would run two programs. One program would work with life sciences industry to bring big data into the world of life sciences and to train scientists in how to use big data in doing their computational work. And if you know anything about life sciences, it's increasingly moving out of wet labs and going into computers. And so that's a big piece of it. And the other piece of it is, Maryland said they've been approached by Marriott and Choice about using artificial intelligence for enhancing the hospitality industry, and they would put that at White Flint as well, which is a great location for us. So I'll be able to have at White Flint a University of Maryland presence in graduate. I'll have WMATA building out a project that'll with a master developer, and there are already major developers in life sciences who are lining up and waiting for that solicitation to go out. Some of the biggest life sciences developers are interested in this. We do that, then the job picture in this county radically begins to change. We're already getting better. We've built record amount of lab space. We've got 3 million underway, another 1 million coming. That is an enormous increase in lab space. When I came into office, you couldn't build lab space in Montgomery County. And when I talked to Shear Partners, they said people are going to Boston and spending twice the rent in Boston that they would spend in Montgomery County, but they'd rather spend it there because of the climate and the ambiance of a place like Kendall Square. So I am hell-bent on replicating the environmental conditions in development that make people want to come. If I'm competing against Kendall Square, I need to offer all the toys, bells, whistles that Kendall Square has. And so that's one of my big objectives, and we're already seeing the fruit of it. Every developer in White Flint, because I told them what I was going to do, did their own research. Every single one of them has flipped projects from residential to life sciences. Every one of them. Doug Furstenberg's got a project, a huge project in White Flint. He's got another one up the road in Shady Grove. We're beginning to see investments in the things that I've been trying to bring to the county. So I think I've been successful in kicking this off. I want to finish it off. I want this so that in 4 years, we're number 4 right now nationally in terms of life sciences. My goal is to be number 1. And I think there's a path there because people want to be close to NIH. They want to be close to NIST. We have all the assets we need. JLL told us, and CBR confirmed it. CBRE, we have more PhDs in this corridor in the life sciences than any other place in the country except one. And so we're prime location for this to happen. And we just need to have the vision to execute on it. And I feel—
Excuse me, Mark.
Yeah.
If it's all right, if you wouldn't mind, if you want to like sum up one point or two, because I want to get to Q&A. So if you want to.
So I'll just say, so, those are 3 things where I think I can make a difference. Getting this economic development going and building this county's reputation is good for every business in Montgomery County. It's good for anybody building housing in Montgomery County. One thing David Blair and I agree on is that housing follows jobs. Jobs don't follow housing. You move to a place because there are jobs. And that's what's going to stimulate the housing market, is bringing more jobs into the county. So I'm very focused on that.
So the first question comes from the president of our federation and the immediate past president of the JCRC, Sam Kaplan, who asks, what in your early life most influenced your decision to get involved in your many years of political activism? Do you find that your thoughts on activism have remained consistent, or have there been any changes as to how to go about positively influencing our community?
There are a couple of things. One is a couple of teachers I had that encouraged me to think, and were not uncomfortable with some of the questions I asked when, regarding social justice and how the world works. So having people who actually encouraged you to think about how the world works, that was a good thing. But I'll say, I think I was 19 years old. I was at a National Student Association conference in El Paso, Texas, and at night we'd go over to cross the border and go into Juarez. And one night I was coming back, and I was standing on the bridge over the Rio Grande, and I just had this, I was looking down at the water, and I thought, I'm going back to a land of hotels and air conditioning and cars and paved streets. And I'm leaving a land where little kids are selling their little sisters and prostituting them, where the streets are dirt, where people are grinding poverty. And I felt like we're breathing the same air. We have the same soil. We have the same river. Somebody drew a line in the sand and said, this is Mexico, this is the United States. And there were two harshly different worlds. And that struck me as such a fundamental injustice that it stuck with me forever. And, other things like watching, blockbusting in my neighborhood in DC, actually standing behind my mother when a real estate agent tried to convince my family to sell their house because those people were coming to the neighborhood and they were going to destroy the neighborhood. And I was like an 8 or 9-year-old kid, and my friends were all Black at that point. It was really, all those things I think contributed. So what changed? I was much more militant when I was 18 and 19 years old. I was much more impatient. I wanted the world to change. I wanted it to change now. I thought that if people just opened their eyes and saw the injustice, that we'd all be able to do this. And it turned out there was a longer struggle. And I will attribute, yeah.
I apologize. I just want to try and,
Yeah.
if you want to conclude, I just want to get to as many questions as possible. I don't mean to interrupt you.
So I'll just say those events like that are things that shaped how I look at the world. I mean, I really believe that this can be a better place, and we have everything we need to do it. We just don't have the will.
Yeah, I think this phone call is filled with people who are active in their community. We could probably all look back something in our families and our education, or that was sort of an aha moment when we decided. I'm going to unmute Barry Graham, who's the president of a shul in Montgomery County, who's indicated he's already unmuted himself, who said he'd like to ask a question directly to you. Barry, please do.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you, Marc, for giving your time for us. And you're always welcome to visit us in White Oak at our shul. Whether or not you believe that traffic is causing climate change, it is an issue that you're passionate about. Driving children to school is a contributor towards traffic, and therefore, according to those that hold that way, climate change. You're also passionate about social equity. Driving them to school makes more traffic, and it also makes it harder for both parents to work, which is important because religious education is extremely expensive due to the limited help from government. What can you do to relieve the burden of driving to school by providing free school busing for all children, regardless of whether they go to private or public schools?
Well, school busing is expensive. I actually think the county ought to be expanding the walk sheds a little bit and allowing kids to walk to school more than we allow kids to walk to school right now. We are working on a project with the school system to convert their fleet over to electric buses. And so the plan is to turn that fleet over. Hopefully that'll reduce some of the resistance we get to buses being located closer to the neighborhoods they serve, as opposed to in large centralized depots. And hopefully the buses over the long term will be less expensive to operate and less expensive to own. We got the school system into a deal, which I think is applicable to the private sector as well, which is that they worked with the financing company, basically selling them the electric buses over 10 years for the price of diesel buses. Because, and this is, it's a secret of capitalism, and it works. All those tax credits that come with electric buses and solar are useless to nonprofits like you and to the county government. So we buy stuff that's rich in tax credits and we can't use them. So basically, they're going to lease the buses from a company that can use all the tax credits. and bring down the cost of the buses by having the company take part of their payment and the tax credits, and the school system get benefits from reduced operating costs, which makes it more affordable to them. So I'm, in favor of doing that. The county, to the extent we have, this is going to open up with a lot of buses the county is going to be able to sell off to other people. There are companies now that are offering axles that are electric axles that can replace the diesel motors even in school buses. We're actually looking at that. So we think some of the things that work for us can work for other people as well.
We have,
Willing
I
to work with
apologize.
people to do that.
I apologize. We've got 3 other questions right now. And by the way, the idea of the JCRC is on record of supporting public transport, of supporting private funds to help our day schools, and JCRC is supports any partnerships between the county and private schools that we can do to help to reduce the cost of transportation on parents, which is very hard. It's very hard, for example, for kids who live in Potomac who want to go to the Berman Academy to go cross county on public busing. So we're always in favor of looking for ways to work with the county to reduce the cost of that. Alon Porat put a question in the box. Mr. Elrich, do you regret or apologize for any of the decisions you and the county council made during the pandemic, which led to economic damage to the people and businesses of Montgomery County? Example, business hour limitations or indoor dining restrictions.
I'll be blunt. No.
Okay.
Look, Montgomery County was a laboratory in a way. We didn't plan on being a laboratory, but we turned out to be a laboratory. And we could see every time Hogan opened things up that the cases started rising again in Montgomery County. We worked very hard to get our case rates down. When COVID first came here, we were ground zero. We had the first 3 cases in the country. Not in the country, but in Maryland. And it exploded here in Montgomery County. We were at the beginning, we were the most infected place because nobody knew what to do with this. This is what we learned from COVID early on. It was not Legionnaire's disease. It did not linger in the air ducts. It did not, it was not ever present and, spread the way Legionnaire's disease. It relied completely on human to human transmission. And the unpleasant reality was the only way you could break that transmission was to limit human to human contact. If the rest of the country had followed our policies and had the rates of fatalities and illness that we had, 300,000 more people would be alive today than are alive today. Our policies saved lives. It was a hard thing to do. I recognize I gave up all the things I love too. I'm a music maniac. I mean, I love going out and hearing live music. I like going, out to dinner with people, and, walked away from all of that because doing that would have cost lives, and lives are irreplaceable. Money's money. Lives, if we had followed a different path, and because we could see what happened between us and Maryland, we knew every single time that we tempered our numbers because we didn't do what the governor did. So I'm guilty. I mean, I chose lives over, business continuity. Businesses got a lot of support from the federal government. And we're in a pretty good shape in terms of rebound now, except for people who are still afraid of going indoors.
Harvey Ryder, our past president, also should note that Marla Schulman and Susan Jerison, other board members of the JCRC, are on the phone. Harvey said his microphone is asking, so he's asked me to ask this question for you. Marc has said there's a shortage of affordable housing throughout the DC region. What policies have been working best in other regions in the country to increase the stock of affordable housing, and how will you convince the council to enact a similar workable policy?
So this is another place, I'll be honest, nobody is able to tackle this because nobody's willing to take on the forces that you have to tackle. You either have to raise a lot more money to increase the subsidies. We got a proposal just from one small apartment building where, in order to save the building for the tenants who own it as a condo, the county would have to put in $350,000 per unit to recover that building. This is not cheap. This is not something you fix with, you're not building new units at 10, at $50,000 a year. New units, cost us in the hundreds of thousands per year on the low end and more depending on the size of the unit. So policies that work, rent stabilization would, and I would only put it on buildings built before 2005 that no longer have any requirements for affordability. I would not put it on new construction so people don't have to worry about stopping new construction, but I'd stabilize the older buildings and do it in a way that guarantees, Tacoma Park has a law like this, that guarantees that owners can make a profit. It guarantees ways they can set their profit targets based on past performance of the building, but it keeps the rents from going up and frankly, from people deciding that my place is now hip and trending, I'm going to raise the rents because this is now a desirable place to be and I can get more rent. So I would do that, because if we don't do that, we're going to lose the rest of these affordable housing units. I would put more money, as we're trying to do, into subsidizing the construction up front. That does work where people are able to do it, but being able to do it at scale is a real issue. We're up to, my fund this year would provide $45 million to buy buildings when they come on the market and work with nonprofits to convert them to ownership. I just put 18 of the county's properties, parking lots, garages, and empty spaces on the market to nonprofit developers. And we're going to give them the land. We're not looking for money. I'm looking for people who will build a higher level of affordability. We've already got a project going on on Bushy Drive on Veers Mill Road. And that project is all affordable for people with at 75% of very median income, all the way down to 30%. That's $30,000 to $75 incomes. So I would do policies that I know work. The problem is putting the policies at scale. And hopefully, as we recover economically, we can put more money in. And the other things, we've got to require developers to give us more than 15%. If you go to Bethesda, we pulled up the 12 buildings that were built since 2012 in Bethesda, the ones that are for rent. They all give us MPDUs. I can say I got my 15% MPDUs. You can get a 1-bedroom apartment for about $1,600. You can get a 2-bedroom apartment for $1,800. The jump from an MPD unit to the market units, 1-bedrooms are $2,500 to north of $3,000, and 2-bedroom units are like $3,500, $4,000 and up.
Sounds like nothing.
There's nothing for people in between.
Yeah.
And so I've suggested that we extend what we do for MPDUs, not just the people at 70% of AMI, but provide units for people up to about $100,000 in income, because this is the span of people who can't find housing here. But there's no model in this country that solved this problem, because everybody's afraid, to interfere too much in the market, and nobody has the resources. We're not alone.
So I want to ask a question from Marla Schulman, and then from my friend Rick Zeidelman. Marla, actually, you honored her recently, not too long ago, for her business in Montgomery County. She runs a incredible translation service around the world that she's grown, and is a leading business figure in our county and a wonderful person. She has a very interesting question regarding social justice and how the world works. What can county government do to create the will among county residents to work together and dialogue to create a truly connected community across lines of diversity and disparity? Policies aren't enough to create change.
So say that again.
What can county government to help to connect residents, diverse residents work together that are not policy related?
So this is something I think we do a fair amount of work in. This county is an amazing county in terms of just the interfaith cooperation that exists in this county. I will tell you, you and the Muslim community share one thing in common. People don't understand sometimes why we fund groups with the name either a Muslim clinic or a Jewish clinic. And I'm always telling them these people serve more non-Jews, non-Muslims than they serve Jews and Muslims. So there's a lot of inner cooperation between groups and a lot of desire for people to to work together. So we build on that. We've got an Office of Community Partnerships. We're trying to strengthen it. We're trying to use it more than it was used in the past. In COVID, we were able to put together and get a deeper reaching community than the county ever had, because we pivoted from the government doing everything and the government running all the programs to giving more power and resources to community groups, because they got deeper in their communities than the government ever would. In the process, we created these hubs where more people are able to, where we're able to work with each other and cooperate with each other in order to get messages out and in order to bring, whether it was food or clothing or set up clinics for us for testing or vaccination, we were able to do it at a level we were never able to do before. And so I look at this as an enormous reservoir of goodwill in this community. And if the county continues to foster opportunities for people to work together, I think we'll be able to build stronger communities that way. We have to, end the isolation of some of the communities in Montgomery County. It is a real shame that, for example, the African-American community has now been surpassed by the Hispanic community for home ownership. We've got to do deeper work, but I think there's a willingness of people to do this. And I think, she's correct. You can introduce all the policies you want, but policies don't necessarily change human behavior. They just set parameters around what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. Real changes when people look at these problems and say, this is a community issue, let's work on it.
I want to ask a question from my friend Rick Zeidelman, who notes that he is a lifetime member of Montgomery County, having lived in Silver Spring, Bethesda, Tacoma Park, and Rockville, watching this county grow for 66 years. He wrote, "We are currently involved with workforce housing, in which there are current limits on the amount of increases in rent. The increases are not sufficient to pay for the increases in utilities, wages, real estate taxes, and other costs of operating. Why does that make sense? And how does that give confidence to those developing additional multifamily properties that Montgomery County is a place to be, which is one of your goals?" You want me to read it again?
I'd have to look at the specifics of what your project is. I know that in Tacoma Park, one of the changes that I helped make to the Tacoma Park law was to allow rent increases that reflected actual cost increases. So we've got an overarching inflation-based rent stabilization law, but landlords were able to come in, and if they demonstrated that their costs were exceeding the inflation rate, they could get rent increases that allowed them to keep pace with their previous level of income from the property. So there are ways to do this. I don't know, which property you're operating, if you want to let me know what that property is. But I think, we put in the flexibility, frankly, because we were worried we were going to lose rent control in a court case, that somebody was going to rule that if I don't allow people to make money, that essentially it's a taking. And we were in a precarious position, and we just said, you got to rethink this. You can't have takings. You've got to allow people to make money. It's okay to limit the rents, but it can't limit the rents in a way that a person can't operate the building. So let me know more about what you're dealing with.
Rick, if you want me to put you directly in touch with Marc,
Yep.
Please email me and I can arrange for the two of you to discuss directly about this project. AJ Campbell, another member of our board, asks, given Brandy Brooks's campaign issues, do we have any way to recover the public funds given to her?
The only way you'd recover the public funds is if she drops out of the race. And so this is one reason she's not going to drop out of the race, because if you've spent say $80,000 or $100,000 already, and you drop out of the race, then you have to pay that back, and she'd have no way to pay that back. So, as long as she stays in, then she's eligible for public funding. People make their judgments on whether they want to vote for her. That's a separate issue.
Okay, Marc, you got 5 more minutes for one more question and a summation?
And AJ, write me that you asked a question in chat about something in Tacoma Park and 50 buildings. I heard it was 50 units, but if you've got information, let me know about it, because that is distressing.
In the last 2 years, it's been 50 buildings that have sold. for sure. The smaller units, the post 1948 brick buildings, many of them have sold and at a much higher rate. So the concern is that those units will be either because of the increased cost now associated with the higher mortgage rates and the higher property taxes, they will be converted out of affordability status and into,
Yeah.
combined into condos or, single family homes with bottom units, that sort of thing.
I mean, that's unfortunate. Tacoma Park has its own right of first refusal law. And,
It does, and it's not been
yes,
exercised at all.
they should have been exercising it. But let
I-
me, if you have a list of units, let me know what's out there, because that's disturbing.
Sure, no problem.
AJ, thanks for bringing that to our attention. Appreciate it. One last question from, I'm sorry, I'm going through the chats up and down, back and forth. Give me 1 second, I apologize. I think from Mr. Sullivan, can you say a few words about the Kerwin plan and how the cost will affect the residents in Montgomery County?
So Montgomery County is actually pretty well positioned under Kerwin. The Kerwin has a lot of requirements, but because Montgomery County over the years has funded our schools well beyond maintenance of effort levels, a lot of the things that other jurisdictions are going to have to do and catch up with, Montgomery County has already been doing. So, for example, on teacher pay, which has to go to $60,000 starting, I think, by 2027, Montgomery County is already very close to that. And this contract and this budget allows them to move even closer to that target. So the analysis that was done for us is that the county's not going to get a huge hit out of Kerwin the way other jurisdictions are getting hit. I mean, places that didn't fund schools are suddenly going to discover that they're going to have to do major additional investments. We're ahead of the game on early childhood. We do more work in early childhood than anybody else does, and we're looking to do more. We've been standing up early childhood centers. We provided training for people doing early childhood. So we understand we need to make those investments. So I'm pretty comfortable with where we're going to be. Our analysts have told us that that our load is probably going to be manageable compared to some other jurisdictions.
Let me, so I'm seeing if we have any final questions. I think that's it. Look, it is, and I'll give you an opportunity to sum up. One of the things, even though JCRC is nonpartisan and doesn't endorse candidates, I've been told it is perfectly fine within the realm of policy that I want to thank you, Marc, for a couple of things because in this current budget, the JCC is building an outdoor playground to help those with disabilities. And I wanted to thank you for including $100,000 in the budget for that, $75,000 for the Jewish Foundation for Group Homes. And the one thing I will brag that Marc did, and I'm going to have an op-ed coming out about this, is that the county executive did create the first local government security program for nonprofits and houses of worship in the United States. And what's incredible about this program, which Marc and I worked on for 2 years, is that if you want to build bricks and mortar, you can go to the federal government. And go to, and there's money available at the state level, which program, by the way, JCRC was instrumental in developing those programs in both Virginia and, but the county program provides operating dollars. And the reason that's so important is that we know after what happened in Colliesville, Texas, that there's two things that contribute to the security of an institution. One is training, and two is the presence of police officers. So, and not only last year, this year you put another $100,000 into it. And I appreciate that. And a lot of our agencies also appreciate the fact that you put a 6% inflationary increase to help cover the costs of the provision of social services. So, actually Barry's question is kind of funny. He says, when are you going to stop calling your weekly media briefings COVID media briefings and just call them media briefings? Have you thought about that, Marc? Are we going to change?
When COVID goes away, I'll stop calling them not COVID. Look, we are really need people to stay focused on this because there's been so much misinformation out there that that people get confused. And one thing we've been able to provide over almost 2 years now is like a steady source of this is where we are, this is what possibly is coming, this is why we're being careful. You know, there are 2 more variants that are actively beginning to circulate. They may be more problematic than this last version of Omicron is. And we don't want people to be surprised. We don't want to tell people this is over and then suddenly start saying, oh, we need to talk to you again. Please tune in. You know, we're having these problems. So we're trying to be consistent, keep people up to date on what we're dealing with. And I found that people, I walk down the street and people walk up to me who I have no idea who they are. And they say, I read your briefing every week. I listen to your video. Thank you for keeping us informed. Because in all this craziness, we've been a really steady, constant voice of don't panic. The world's not going to fall apart. There are things we have to do, but we can do these things and we can manage this and we can point to our success. And I got to tell you, our success compared to the rest of the country is something that has given people confidence in what we're doing. So we know we have an obligation to keep people as informed about this as we can, and we will. And I don't think we're out of COVID yet.
Marc, on that note, I would like to give you 2 minutes to please sum up and to say anything else you'd like to say to our audience, and maybe to ask for their vote or to summarize any last minute thoughts. The floor is yours. Go for it.
Look, I feel like, you know, that getting through COVID was no small thing. Getting through COVID and keeping the county government intact and maintaining a continuity in services took not just a focus on my part, but a focus on the people who worked for me, who basically understood. And one of the themes we had from the beginning inside the county government was that every problem that we were facing before COVID is going to be staring at us when we come out of COVID. So that's why, you know, we had plans for what we were going to do with affordable housing when the economy recovered. We've been working at bringing businesses here and meeting with the university and, you know, WMATA all during COVID, because we knew when I'm out of this, there are things we need to ignite and we want to be in a position to ignite them. I've worked under the constraints of policies that are not mine. So if people are unhappy about the lack of jobs coming to the county and the lack of housing, look at the people who created the policies that have led to this. I've actually focused on the why, not this is a fact that we're not getting jobs. The question is, why aren't we getting jobs? It's a fact we're not getting housing. But when you've got all these housing units approved, the problem is, why aren't people building? So I've focused on the why because I'm interested in solutions, not rhetoric. And then our policies bend. And I do things that, you know, are different than what I would have done. I'm not an ideological purist. So, you know, providing, you know, loans to companies and giving incentives, which I've continued to do throughout this to bring businesses to Montgomery County. Not something I do easily, but when I look at a deal and I can see this deal pencils out and it's going to bring good jobs to Montgomery County, I'm there. So that's why you see this development going on. You see projects, you know, particularly all over the 355 corridor going up. That's not the sign of an unhealthy county. This is a sign of a county that's growing. And I've encouraged that growth rather than fought that growth. But I am purposeful about things. You know, it is incumbent on us to get more affordable housing. We just cannot let the market, because the market has never solved the affordable housing problem. It is never going to solve it. Absent government action, a combination of policies and money, we're not going to address it. And I think that would be a real crime for our community, a shanda for our community, if we're not willing to attack the thing that's going to destabilize families and put them at a disadvantage. I think if you've worked with me, and you know, we worked around on, like you said, on the money for houses of worship and the other nonprofits, working with you and making sure we got this done in a way that didn't jeopardize us legally was really, really important. And I think it was a good example of sitting down and saying, this is what we want to do. How do we do this in a way that we're going to be able to do it and sustain it? We do that with our immigrant programs. It's, you know, we do things that other jurisdictions don't do because we figured out how we could do this work and not run afoul of federal law, for example. So, I'm very pragmatic. If I'm anything, I try to be pragmatic and I try to solve problems. And ideology is sort of like religion. It's a framework. You kind of believe in this. You have a sense of purpose, and you kind of understand what you'd like the world to look like. But at the end of the day, you cannot implement ideology. You have to implement real things on the ground that work and make a difference. And so one has to be flexible. And I think I've demonstrated that I've been flexible. I know when I won, there were people who thought, my God, the guy's going to bring socialism to Montgomery County. And I would, one of my favorite things is I got endorsed once by this very wide civic organization. It represented everybody in the county. And one of the Republicans objected to that group endorsing me. And another Republican got up and said, for all the reasons you worried about, he will defend our communities. He will work with us. And he said, and then it was a joke line, I guess. He said, he's not going to bring red troops to Rockville. And, and I thought that was kind of amazing that somebody would say that in the civic thing, but it's sort of the truth. I mean, this is not about, overturning the social order or anything else. It's about making this place work. And how do we make it work for everybody? Everybody should have a shot here. And I think, I've demonstrated that I'm willing to make pragmatic, practical decisions that actually make a difference for the county. And I'm aggressive at it.
On that note, County Executive, I wanted to thank you very much for joining us, and to also note the presence of Debbie Spielberg, the Special Assistant to the County Executive, and also thank Deborah Miller, who's JCRC's Director of Maryland Government and Community Relations, and Lisa Silverman is my colleague, Director of Operations. I don't think I'm leaving anybody out. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on this call. And we look forward to having more additional series of briefings with you in the future. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and have a wonderful day.